What's happening, Raider Nation? Today, I'm going to be going over some of the highlights of Mike Mayock, the GM, of his pre-draft press conference. It was just held today, so I'm going to get into some of the key things that stood out. The biggest thing that definitely stood out is that they're talking about their picks, and Mike, they're talking about the flexibility the Raiders have, with their four picks in the first two rounds, three in the first, one in the early second. And he's talking about, you know, getting value and whatnot and finding players. And one of the specific statements he makes is he reiterates it twice in a row, actually, that he loves players in between the range of 20 and 60. Now, if you looked at the Raiders draft spots, they have 20, was it, the two late, 24 and 27 and 35. That's only three in that huge range, of players. So Mike talks about being flexible and how anything's open. Well, with that statement, immediately my mind is thinking, okay, and he mentions multiple needs. The Raiders are going to try to trade back. With probably one of those three later picks. Probably try to get a premier guy at the 4, but trade back with one of those picks. And by trading back, like I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, for example, pick 27 with the Giants, you could get a second, which would be like 8 spots back, and then a third. So you get in that range that he likes, 20 to 60, and a future third to help for the Khalil Mack trade. I expect them to have, as good as a chance as any to be able to trade back late first. Teams are going to be wanting to get that quarterback. There's always one late, and they're right in front of the Chargers, ahead of the Patriots, so it makes sense, for teams to target the Raiders to trade back with. So that was definitely the biggest thing that stood out, was how much Mike Mayock reiterated how much he loves players between 20 and 60, because often they're safer. They're guys that really love the game, and they could be safer than top 10 picks. That's where you really find quality football players. So the Raiders definitely going to be in the business for trading down, I see, to acquire multiple picks in that range. Some other things that stood out about Mayock is, he refers to league value a lot, and about how his old job was, really trying to stack a board for all the teams and get the value. So, he's talking about value, for example. To compare, it would be like, he brings up this specific instance of like running back. So he's saying, you're going to want to do, a little history. How many running backs go on average? How many look like that in this draft, compared to edge, for example. So like edge is going to go higher than running back because edge is more valuable. So he talks about knowing the value of players and the league value of players, and with trading. And this is something that Raider fans know specifically. In any draft day trades we've done over the last several years, we always get worked. We never get proper value, league value. We should know, expect more in certain times, expect less in certain times. For example, last year we traded back so the Cardinals supposedly could get their quarterback of the future, Josh Rosen, and we picked up a measly 3rd and a 5th. We should have gotten more. It's about value. There's a value for every position in the NFL, for every scheme. It changes year to year. And he's really into knowing the value of positions, picks, and players. And that's something that I feel like in previous years we've really struggled with, getting proper value and knowing, for example, PJ Hall, yeah, he's a great potential player, but the value of picking him where we did, we could have gotten him easily another 10, 15 spots back, if not more. So we didn't get exactly the highest value, for example, with that pick, or in trade backs in years past with, even the Miami Dolphins trade back with when we got DJ Hayden, they took Jordan, we didn't get proper value. Another thing is he's into really knowing the opponents. He talks about a footprint, knowing the GMs, each GM, knowing their needs, what their draft history is about, to forecast what's around. Also, he talks about, balancing needs and, best player available. So he alluded to, if, you have two players very similar ranked, with both confidence in both of them, you're obviously going to lean towards the need. That's okay. Um, but, when he was talking about, for example, the 3 picks late, for example, 24, 27, 35, let's say he's evaluating, at that spot, I need maybe a safety, an edge, a tight end, or a running back, let's say. Well, if you have guys equally rated right on in that range, you're probably going to take the edge. One, because the edge always gets drafted higher than those positions, and there's fewer of them in that range that should be going. There's probably only about 3 guys that should be going in that range. Maybe a Farrell, Winovich, Collier, maybe, and Ferguson. 4 guys. If you name safeties that should go in that range, Adderley, maybe Thornwell, maybe Savage, it goes on and on, potentially. If you're talking about running backs, well, there's only really one running back that should be in that range. So you're probably not going to really jump on that running back. You'd rather take that edge first, because there's going to be around those players. So he talks about grouping players, that you'd be acceptable with, like in that range, and which one can't you live without, just based on the further it goes, the more likely they're going to be picked. So, for example, if it was between Winovich and like Adderley, for example, at pick 24, based on what he said, I would expect him to go Winovich, because there's not as many edge guys, in that range. You better get yours when you can, and then you're going to be able to find a safety later, like Adderley, a couple picks later, or Savage, that would be fine, or Thompson, or Rapp. Another thing that really stood out, was about red flags. He mentioned how John is more open to, rolling the dice. He's more of a conservative. And that makes sense. Coaches believe that, they can, bring the best out of players. So that makes sense. So, for example, and that would be, if red flag was like production, like a Rashawn Gary, Mayock would probably lean not so heavy on him. Gruden would be like, oh, no, we can get him turned around. We can get production. He has all the talent. So it'd be like an example of that. Another thing that really stood out is how much Mike Mayock is really into interactions and meeting with players and sending them through the grinder and seeing how much they really love football. He mentions about, when they come here, let's test them, let's measure them, then let's let them grind tape 5 to 6 hours, and then after that, let's see who really wants to be involved with football more, who's craving for more, and who's ready to check out and get the plane ticket. So once again, the things that really stand out to me is that, Gruden's going to be more towards need. He's going to lead more towards best player available with a balance, but understands that, Gruden's got a lot of say and control. So I could see us leaning towards needs with that perspective. And, he's really big into finding out the footprint, forecasting. And definitely the biggest thing that stood out is the possibility of the Raiders looking to trade back one of those picks, 24, 27, or 35, to acquire those picks that he said he loves between pick 20 and 60. So look for the Raiders to try to trade out late round 1, early round 2, and pick up more of those sweet spot picks that Mayock loves. Leave me your thoughts and your concerns. Thanks.